Here we are again. Now the next speaker, after working as a professor and teacher at the Bocconi University of Milan, he is now a researcher, consultant, and a company trainer, and coach involving public institutions. And we have with us Roberto Vaccani. Professor, good afternoon. How are you? I'm okay. What about you? I see you in good shape. So, digitalization, the digital world, has been part of our daily lives. And then last February, something changed. Everyone tried to comply with this new approach and smart working, and then we were a little bit lost somehow. But can we define what happened? So just to frame the situation and also to provide you with a background of my contribution, the area of digitalizations, well, the pandemic has been a sort of stress test, a global and international stress test that raised a situation of crisis, or better, which showed some situations which were neglected and which were not completely visible. And the stress due to the global pandemic, maybe, well, for the first time, it involved the entire world in a moment of globalization, forced all of us to reconsider a few things, including the remote activities. So a sort of revision of face-to-face relations which have become remote ones. So in all this, there's a set of new opportunities which we can sort of identify in a toolkit, right, of professionals. The main problem is that we are in a digital era already, and probably we have not fully identified it because we were, fully available to do so. Like, for instance, digital TV, or when we use, for instance, the internet, where we Google something like a book or TV programs or some names or characters, but we actually are spectators. We look for contents, we look for information, and it is a sort of one-way communication because we receive this information that we've asked for. The problem is when, conversely, we are proposed to replace, for let's say, impossibility to directly manage communication, where we asked to replace this type of communication with remote communication. Then in that case we have some technological problems, but then we also understand that things are different. So what are the opportunities and what are the constraints for this type of approach? Please bear in mind that technology is in the hands of engineers, and this has been the case for many years now, like 25 or 30 years. So technology has become part and parcel of some professional fields. But these professional fields include the digitalization of things or procedures. The problem arises when you want to digitalize flexible things, like communication. Well, this is the first time that this happens. So COVID forced entire populations used to work with relations. I'm talking about salespeople. I'm talking about those that, for instance, have relations with customers and work in front offices. And I'm talking about teachers and managers and also entrepreneurs. So all of those that for instance, have relations with others and which are used to live those relations in terms of real and face to face relationships and not remote ones. This highlighted a number of constraints but also opportunities because these jobs had to, let's say, deal with a surrogate of human relations and communications. So we may call it remote digital communication. So it is a discontinuity. It is a leap, that exception made for some aspects like technological disruption, but they create problems, especially in understanding to what extent it is possible to replace real communication and face-to-face communication with digital communication. Yeah, but then, Professor, smart working. Okay, we talk about it every day and it's part of our daily lives now. So, is there any other limit we have to take into consideration? So, of course, we can talk about opportunities and then we talk about limits. Then I just wanted to conclude on a positive note. Okay, but it's fine anyway. We can talk about the positive sides first. I'll start with the opportunities. But the opportunities of these technologies include the fact that it is a container. A container, a sort of library within which we can gather or grasp materials in real time, and we also send messages in real time, and we do that on a constant basis. So it is communication and communication that can be sent from one side of the world to another. It is possible to be part of these large, let's say, containers in terms of creativity. And also, they also create confusion because if you access those containers without having a good idea what you're looking for, then that's a mess. You risk to be, seduced by information and also by fake news, as it is often the case. And of course, you see that you can find easily both drinking water and sewage, just to put it in a sort of proverb way. And this is the first opportunity. The second opportunity is that we've seen that when it comes to school, if you have teachers that can easily involve students, then a face-to-face lesson can be replaced by digital materials, also because there's no interaction, and therefore nothing is unforeseeable. Whereas there are other situations, for instance, it is important to know what knowing and the difference between knowing and mastering knowledge. Because if you just want to know, it is okay to access information in this way. But if you want to master information, then you need something more. And this goes back to a definition in Latin. And of course, we have somehow questioned now a few things, mainly relating to, for instance, some activities, some jobs allow you to work remotely, and then you can also decide not to go to your office. You can work from home, and you can spend 3 days a week at home, and then it is okay anyway. With this psychological mix, based on which, if you are home, you are sort of in between hobby and work, and you tend to work more. okay, this is an approach, and then you need to be organized, and you need to know exactly what to do and how to do things, and you have to reorganize your activities. But then back office, administration, accounting, but that deal with data, not with relations, well, this can be done, of course, remotely. The problem is that when you have to set new times and new places, well, and if it becomes a permanent thing, then you have to adopt the right approach. So what I mean is that if this is on an ongoing basis, maybe this tool is not the best possible one. In any case, on the one side we have the opportunities, on the other side we have the constraints. What about the constraints? The constraints involve when you have to master the information acquired. For instance, when you have a close relation between people and you have different approaches and you have different people involved, different company functions, and you have, for instance, employees that speak sort of, different languages, because one is an accountant and one is maybe a lawyer. So what happens then? I don't think that with a digital approach you can settle or solve a situation when you have two people speaking different types of languages. If you have someone who's just linked to numbers and figures and someone else who's linked to words, in those cases, or concepts, in those cases it is hardly possible to find a solution, because we are focusing when we speak remotely, we are just focusing on what we have to say. We are not focusing on what the other person is telling us. We are focusing on our keyboard. We are focusing on the things we want to say. But when you are somehow alone at home trying to remotely say things, you have no eye contact, you have no physical information, and the conflict becomes larger. And you cannot solve situations if you speak remotely to someone else. And maybe after 4 hours of discussion remotely, maybe someone says, okay, let's fix a place and identify a place where we can meet and talk about it. That would be the natural evolution. But in this case, what are the values that we have to try and keep and preserve? I go back to one thing, because we have other opportunities to be considered. For instance, as to the learning, face-to-face lesson can also be replaced by the digital approach, whereas when I have to teach how to do things, that is different. Because there you need labs, and then you need, for instance, when you're talking about crafts and or when you have to teach others how to have relations. But how can you do that remotely? For instance, when other approaches are involved, and other approaches that are not just the rational one, but then you have, for instance, visual, and also, well, when the five senses are involved, then the digital device doesn't help, and has to do with this specific situation. So in those cases, you must meet someone else, especially when you need to involve the five senses. So what else do you see for the future? Well, you mentioned exhibitions, for instance. In exhibitions, you physically have a sort of line separating two parties. That is to say, the visual aspect of the exhibition can be done remotely with videos and images and photos that include all of the possible elements, and then the participants may watch things remotely and in a video as a spectator. So promotion can be done through a video. The exhibition per se is something different because the main goal of the exhibition is to have an occasion to encounter, to meet someone informally, where customers and suppliers and potential partners know each other, and then the reliability factor is involved, and also the emotional side is involved, and also the conflicts that may somehow turn a relationship into something reliable. So we are mammals. We have multi-sensor and emotional relations and not digital ones. So we cannot just rely on the digital approach. And this is the reason why, unfortunately, the human beings have to be involved. And this is part of the 500 million years of evolution of the species. And what do you think that technology and digitalization, as well as the heart and the passion, can allow everything to work? Yeah, of course. As Mediterranean people, we are half from the west and half from the east because we are creative and also individualist. In a sense, because creativity is not entailing the tidy things. But then technology is the kingdom of order and rules. And of course, there are let's say, orderly situation like software. So we have more difficulties in dealing with those situations. And for this reason, we have to define a broader, let's say, border, because we are far more physical than other populations. There are other populations that are colder and which accept, for instance, cold figures. A very quick question at the end of your contribution. So we were saying that after this pandemic and new technologies, do you think that we need more human approach? Well, this is a psychological phenomenon. If you are lacking a primary need, and please remember that primary needs are the genetic ones, so hunger, thirst, sex, sleep, and social relations, well, these are primary needs. When a primary need is somehow eliminated or squeezed or compressed, then you have an increase in the wish to have it. It's like love. And it's like, for instance, when you are in a diet. If you are in a diet, you feel that you want to eat more. Yeah, the less you have, the more you want it. And of course, you have creativity with gossip and fake news and all the rest. And you have, for instance, the stories that are told and gossip and people that talk about someone when someone is not there. And of course, you have, for instance, gossip at all levels. And this is part of the creativity that we, of course, have. And we need this. Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor, from this journey from theory to practice. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Professor.